Hey, welcome to Off My Bridge. My name is Guy, and I'm talking about the differences between Star Trek Adventures 1 and Star Trek Adventures 2. Now, in a distant galaxy, in a far, far away place, long time ago, I did a review of Star Trek Adventures 1 with a friend of mine whilst I was still living in sunny South Africa. Anyway, we didn't like it, and we didn't like it for a couple of reasons. And now, Star Trek Adventures 2 came out, and I absolutely love it. So if you are currently playing Star Trek 1 and you want to understand what are the differences, then this is the video for you. If you want to understand more about how to play Star Trek Adventures 2, this is not the video for you. I'm doing a technical deep dive, so I would suggest you go and watch some of my other videos, like the one that I did last week on the basics of Star Trek Adventures 2. These differences that I'm talking about are primarily derived from videos that I have watched of other folks doing reviews and interviews that I've done with the folks at Modiphius. And I did not play a lot of Star Trek Adventures 1 because I didn't like it. I've now been playing a lot of Star Trek Adventures 2. So there might be some differences that I have missed, but these are the ones that I've noticed as the biggest ones. Principally, one of the first things that they have done, and this is to their credit that they are still developing and refining and going back and re-examining, is they have changed up a lot of the terminology. They have streamlined certain things, they have renamed certain things to be in sync with each other. There are so many of those little things, I'm not going to go through and list each and every single one of them. But by streamlining the terminology, suddenly things are less intimidating. It's a lot more searchable as well, and it's a lot more applicable. So that's something that they have done as a surface change. Now, obviously, the biggest change is the challenge dice. Those awful little D6s that would just ruin your day, those are gone. Liked them, hated them, don't care. They're not in Star Trek Adventures 2, and you don't need them. Your value range of the things that challenge dice would do is so variable in Star Trek Adventures 2 that you are not, by fixing those values, creating cookie cutter every single time I hit with a phaser, I'm doing X damage. That doesn't happen because of the amount of variables that can be applied to that 5 damage. So if you attack and you are using the same weapon as your enemy, there is no guarantee that the values will be equal in terms of the amount of damage that is dealt or received. So by taking the challenge dice away, your calculations for combat are a lot faster, because it's quite literally, do I hit the target number to shoot my opponent at range? Yes, I do. Great. How much damage do you do? I also found that getting the difficulty number sometimes might have been a challenge, and then you were let down by the challenge dice. So this has just made it a little bit more likely that if you succeed, you actually succeed and will achieve something of value. Traits can now increase in potency. A higher potency means that player characters are going to have to do more to reduce that potency. Each round, they can reduce the potency value by 1. So if it's a fire 3, it literally will take 3 successful attempts to bring that fire under control. So that's an interesting additional trait tweak, say that many times, and that trait couldn't do it. That trait tweak means that traits are a little bit more valuable now, especially when the players are creating them just as much as the non-player characters are creating them. Extended tasks have changed slightly in terms of how they are now presented within the game. Again, with those challenge dice gone, every time your character succeeds at an extended task, you use the department score of that task to reduce the extended task by. That becomes your impact. So if your department is 4, you reduce the progress tracker by 4. It's as simple as that. Of course, the progress tracker has got resistance, which reduces your impact. So there are ways and means of making this take longer. Shields on a starship have exactly the same approach. The amount of damage dealt to the shields, the ship has resistance, and that reduces the amount of damage, and then the shields go down. Both extended tasks and shields have got now a 50% midway point where stuff changes. Starships become shaken, they get the shaken attribute, of which there are multiple outcomes. You roll for it randomly, and the extended task things change up, whether positively or negatively. That's up to the DM in terms of how they've designed this whole thing. And then at 25%, again, another change up. For starships, they get another shaken condition or a breach if they've already been shaken this round. And for extended tasks, again, something changes. The resistance or the difficulty number changes depending on how you go. Both progressions are now on a fixed kind of scale, which means it's a lot easier to calculate when you're creating extended tasks. Well, if my player's average is going to be 4 in the department, whenever they succeed, they're going to be reducing it by 4 each time. So if it's got 16 points that they need to reduce it by, that's 4 successful rolls. If I increase the resistance to 2, well, suddenly it's not 4, now it's 6, and so on and so on. So the math becomes easier in terms of designing those things. The way that stress works for characters is slightly different and is much more clearly defined than it ever was in Star Trek Adventures 1. The way that stress works is stress is a representation of physical and mental and spiritual fatigue. It is not damage. It is exhaustion. You just get tired. Why? Because not only can you suffer stress during physical combat, but you suffer stress during social combat. Star Trek Adventures 2 has got the 3 different types of combat: character combat, starship combat, and social combat. When you're trying to interrogate someone, when you're trying to deceive someone, when you're trying to seduce someone, when you're trying to negotiate with someone, you can suffer stress because the opponent is really good at resisting, or because they are interrogating you and you are trying to resist being interrogated. So stress is a function of exhaustion in one of those 3 areas: mental, spiritual, or physical. It does not represent physical damage. What this means is that people like counselors and doctors can now start to apply their healing skills to reducing your stress by having a quiet counseling-like session, by talking about it, by just resting up under medical care. It gives the characters a little bit more to do during situations where stress is high. Threat spend from the GM's perspective has been very clearly defined. There are now specific things and specific values for threat spend. I don't personally agree with some of the threat spend values that have been included, but that's a personal preference. That's not a rules thing, and certainly not going to stop me from playing the game. There are also certain threat spends that can only be done once per adventure now. Again, very clearly defined. This is what you use it for. This is what you don't use it for. Quite a big change with determination. You can only have 3 determination. However, it no longer gives you an additional d20. Now it takes one of your existing die and it sets it to a critical success. So if you're only rolling 2 dice, one of them becomes a critical success. And that's it. That's all that happens. There's no additional die that gets set to a critical... No. You take your die pool, whatever's in there, one of them gets taken out and turned into a critical success. Booyakasha, that's it. Alternatively, you can use determination to now suddenly have a talent that you didn't possess before. With those challenge dice gone, cover has changed quite significantly. Cover is effectively either you can't hit the person, or it becomes a contested roll. So you roll your control plus security check to make a ranged attack against your opponent. Your opponent rolls the same stuff. Whoever gets more successes succeeds. And this then would allow you, potentially, if you spend momentum, to fire back and do damage at your attacker. Because it's a firefight, right? And you're firing at each other and you're ducking and you're dodging. There's no more challenge dice, there's no more potential failures, etc., etc. On that one, it's now just directly opposed. So those are broad strokes, the changes. And if you never played Star Trek 1, you're going, that's not, were those significant? When you are moving a character from first edition to second edition, or a starship from first edition to second edition, all of those books of yours, is it easy? Is it compatible? No, it's not compatible. Definitely isn't compatible. Stress is calculated differently. Shields are calculated differently. You have more talents now. You have species talents. There's things called pastimes. So there are a lot of fundamental changes. And within starships, certain values, base values have changed. Weapon values have changed because they're now fixed values, right? Rather than relying on challenge dice. What you can take from Star Trek Adventures 1 into Star Trek Adventures 2 is the stories, the adventure ideas, NPC names, and things like that. But the actual numbers, you're going to spend a lot of time recalculating, adding in extra stuff. You might as well just make new characters or new starships. They're going to release new books. We know they're going to release new books. Hopefully those books don't rehash the same material that they did in Star Trek Adventures 1. Hopefully it'll be, okay, here's some stuff, but here's some more new stuff, right? I feel that the changes are definitely good. I feel that the book and the way it's been presented is definitely good. The folks that have been involved have learnt, have listened, have adapted, have adjusted. And this is the Borg version, if you ask me. This is Resistance is Futile. If you're still playing Star Trek Adventures 1, try Adventures 2. You will find that you're going, this is moving quickly. I miss nothing from the old version. This all makes sense. This is cool. What are your thoughts? What do you think? And I know there are lots of you still playing Star Trek Adventures 1. You've bought as many of the books as you possibly can. I was buying a book here and there when I saw them on sale because I'm a Star Trek fanatic. We're going to be doing a deep dive into threat and how to use it in next week's episode. There's a lot going on with threat. I love it. And there's some parts I don't love. But we'll find that out next week. Until then, live long and happy gaming.